Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 64 for the 23rd of Shevat in a leap year. And today we're going to conclude chapter 23. And if you recall, what we've been discussing is the different effects that keeping God's commandments as well as learning God's Torah and speaking about God's Torah and thinking about God's Torah, what effect that has upon our soul and upon our body. And the focus as of late, yesterday and continuing with today, is we're really focusing on the extra value that Torah study has and involving ourselves in thinking about Torah and in speaking about Torah. So we already spoke about yesterday how the unique value of the human mind and the human speech is that it has the capacity to actually unify in a really, really unique way with God's will in a way that no other creation, even in the highest of worlds, can do, by virtue of the fact that we have a human mind and that we have a human mouth. And today we're going to continue with that theme, and we're going to bring it one step further and discuss how this unique ability that we have of our intellect, specifically in terms of uniting with God in this way, can actually lead us to developing a really profound sense of awe of God, which is the ultimate purpose. And so to me, this is, maybe my own personal interjection here, but to me, this section that we're going to be learning today is kind of a very good glimpse into the philosophy of Chabad Chassidus and the methodology of Chabad Chassidus in terms of serving Hashem. So you may be familiar, there are many different types of Judaism. They say there's 70 faces of the Torah, all kinds of different Jews, all kinds of different Chassidus, even different ways of serving God, of pathways to serve God. So the unique approach of Chabad Chassidus, which is really encompassed in its name, Chabad, is that the way to come to service of God in an authentic sense is through the mind. That the gateway to true service of Hashem is through the mind, and that is illustrated in the name Chabad. Chabad, again, is an acronym for the first three intellectual attributes of the soul: Chochmah, Bina, and Das. So, today we're going to look into that a little bit and how Torah study specifically and using our minds to connect to God can really ultimately lead us to a profound sense of awe of God that we couldn't have gotten to in other ways. And so let's get straight into the text and see how the Alter Rebbe breaks it down. So he starts off and he says, and from all of this, from everything we've been learning so far, and again, go back to previous episodes to catch up if you haven't already. So from this, the wise man, in Hebrew it's hamaskil, the man of intellect, will be able to draw down into him a great awe in being involved in Torah when he starts to meditate how his soul and its garments and the garments that are in its mind and in its mouth, meaning the garments of thought and speech, are totally unified with utmost unity in the supernal will and in the light of the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, in the light of the infinite, blessed be He, in truth, in true unity that is revealed within them. So just again, a little recap is, again, we learned yesterday how when a person is involved in Torah study through their intellects, thinking about Torah, or their mouth speaking words of Torah, these two garments, which are the internal garments of the godly soul, namely thought and speech, become actually unified with God's will and wisdom. And this ultimately means that since God is one with his will and wisdom, we are uniting with God himself, with the light of the Or Ein Sof, the light of God himself. And so now the Alter Rebbe goes on and he explains, what is this light that we're talking about, this ultimate light of God, the Ein Sof Baruch Hu. This is something, this light, in comparison to this light, all of the supernal worlds, whether they're the higher worlds or the lower worlds, are considered as if naught and nothingness in actuality, to the point that God doesn't actually, this supernal light doesn't actually become vested within them in a true way, but rather it's too lofty to be vested within them, but it just encompasses them from above. It's called Sovev Kol Almin in Hasidic terminology, in a way of makif, in a way of hovering, of like encompassing over them, surrounding them, in order to vitalize them. But their main life force is just a little bit of a ray, a radiance that becomes vested within them, which is all that they can handle, so that they will not become totally nullified in their source completely. So they wouldn't be able to handle more than just a slight ray of this radiance. And, this radiance, which is like something that, so what the Alter was really trying to bring out here is that this radiance, which is so lofty that all of the worlds, whether the higher worlds or the lower worlds, can't handle to contain this radiance in that way. This is the radiance that you are becoming unified with when you involve yourself in Torah study in an intellectual way or in speaking the words of Torah. It's a pretty intense thing. And then the Alter Rebbe brings a citation here to support this and to kind of explain it in a little bit of a deeper way. And this is taken from Dvarim, the book of Dvarim, chapter 6, verse 24, where it says, V'tzaveni Hashem et kol hachukim ha'ele lira'ah et Hashem v'gomer. And what that means if we translate it, it says, and God commanded us to fulfill all these statutes in order to fear Hashem. So what the Alter Rebbe is alluding to here is this idea that through keeping the commandments of God, this will lead us to come to this great fear of God. And then in brackets, the Alter Rebbe gives another citation, this time from Pirkei Avos, chapter 3, verse 17, where he says that im en chokhmah en yira, that without wisdom there is no fear or awe. Yira can be translated as fear or awe. And so so basically what the Alter Rebbe is bringing out here is this idea that how do we come to a sense of fear and awe of God is through the mitzvahs he's mentioned in the first citation. And then here he says through chokhmah, through wisdom. So the way we come to this great sense of fear and awe of God is through wisdom, through Torah. And then here the Alter Rebbe says that this is why in the Gemara we find that what is the Torah called? The Torah is referred to as the Torah Lidarta. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which literally means a gateway to the courtyard. Which, okay, so what is the Torah leading us to if it's a courtyard? So this courtyard is leading us to awe of God, to a fear of God. But then the Alter Rebbe says that not every mind can handle this kind of awe. So, we don't all have this like intellectual capacity to be able to contain this fear of God. But then he says that even if somebody cannot handle this level of fear of God, it's not a little bit or not a lot because of the lowliness of his soul, of the quality of his soul in its source and in its root. So, there are some souls that do come from a lower level within the 10 spheres of Asiya. Nevertheless, this should not deter a person from studying Torah and being involved in Torah and being involved in mitzvahs and things like that. And he says we're going to elaborate upon this a little bit further. So that's the section for today. And so just to give a recap is basically what the Alter Rebbe is saying is he's saying that the Torah, learning Torah study is a gateway to come to a sense of awe of God. And how is this? He breaks it down is because when a person starts to learn Torah and to understand this idea that when they are involved in Torah study through their minds and through their mouth, and they understand how this is bringing them to this like unity, this really, really deep unity with their creator in a way that we are being unified with the supernal will of our creator, which is ultimately the light of God himself. This which is, and then they understand that what is this light? This light is something which is so intense that even the highest of all worlds and the lower worlds and all the worlds can't even contain the light really, other than just like a small glimmer of it. This like sense of, wow, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this is the light that I'm being unified with, should lead a person to a deep sense of awe of God. And if it doesn't, the Alter Rebbe says, don't worry about it and just keep studying, and we'll discuss it later, how it still is having some kind of effect. So that's it for today. So I hope that was clear. And tomorrow we're going to move on and move into chapter 24. I'll speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.